Ember Witch. Book 1. The Lich. Volume 1. Black Tragedy. Chapter 3. Half-Blood. October 21st to December 21st, 458 BME. Fragment 23. The Abomination. They stepped down the stairs with careful consideration as the dense pressure of necromantic magic collided into them. They made it down in only a few minutes and stepped out into a vast open cavern that was home to a forest of dense and tall trees. The quiet nature of the forest dug deep into Fevra as he had spent his entire life amongst the trees. No birds sang out, no deer screeched their mating calls. Only the sound of dripping water and insects broke the silence. He walked forward in a near trance-like state, going back to his childhood. He stepped to a tree and placed his hand upon its bark.
How could any trees grow down here? There is no sun, no light for them to absorb. This place is wrong, as if it only exists in a dream, yet I can feel the tree breathe.
Fevra said as Vera stepped up to him.
I have no idea, I am just as stunned as you are,
Vera replied, looking around her at the forest that shouldn't exist.
I completely understand why the necromancers picked this place. The fact that this is here speaks so much about the magic that was lost over the centuries.
Fevra replied, and Vera nodded, still in awe of the trees that stood before her.
The blade has to be around here somewhere. Let's get moving. The longer we sit here, the quicker the elven will wake up,
Vera said after a moment, and Fevra stepped away from the tree. They began following the dark pressure, letting it lead them through the trees along a path that had been carved through the grass and weeds that grew around each tree. After a few minutes, they found themselves standing in front of a statue that had been overwhelmed by vines and other plant life. Sitting upon the pedestal, the statue was erected on laid a jagged, unassuming sword. Its blade had dozens of chips, scratches, and dents embedded within the metal. Vera and Fevra approached the sword carefully. Their auras cloaked around them to stave off the dense fog of death that flowed off of the sword. They nodded at each other and pushed their color out, enveloping the sword in a purple glow. They concentrated deeply, and in a flash the darkness subsided. They dropped their auras and looked around the forest. The silence was deafening, causing unease to well in their minds. Vera picked up the blade and slid it into a ring that hung from her belt. The blade was smaller than the ring but caught itself by the cross guard, letting it hang from her hip. She nodded in the direction of the back wall, signifying that they should begin looking for the beast Haru spoke of. They walked softly through the grass, keeping their minds sharp as they followed the second source of dark energy. They tracked the source for another few minutes until they heard the sound of large footsteps just a bit further in front of them. They approached cautiously, coming upon a clearing where a mass of rotting flesh and bone wobbled about, uncertain of its fate. Fevra covered his nose, trying to block the stench that permeated off of the creature. Vera, being used to the smell of death from her years as a necromancer, only teared up as the smell touched her nose. They looked at each other and nodded. Vera hopped up and grabbed the branch of a tree, pulling herself up. Fevra tracked around a few trees and knelt down beneath a shrub. The creature shuffled around, then turned in Fevra's direction. He stayed low, waiting for Vera to make the first move. The creature took a few steps forward, giving Fevra a good look at its rotting body. A maw in the shape of a crooked mouth full of broken bones and antlers laid on top of a round, almost orb-like body. A beak composed of 2 deer skulls agape in horror. Spindly legs of meat and bone that wobbled as it shifted its weight around. A thin tail that whipped around the ground, completely made from bone. He watched the ungodly abomination, closely observing how it carried itself. He heard a whistle and seconds later felt Vera's color flare to life. The beast lifted its head at the sudden explosion of energy and sound and screeched a noise that made Fevra's ears ring. He stood up, letting his color explode around him, and in a swift movement threw out a fireball. His blue flames crashed into the beast's side at the same moment that Vera's red energy beam slammed into its face. The creature spun around with intense speed, whipping its tail towards Fevra. He jumped over the bones, avoiding the bladed end of it, and lashed out with another fireball. Vera leaped from the tree, summoning a blade in her hands. She dropped onto the beast, avoiding the maw on its back, and stabbed the blade into its decaying flesh. It bellowed out another scream, then began bucking, flinging Vera to the ground. She rolled away from its malformed feet as it attempted to crush her. Fevra shot out a mass of darts, letting them sink into the beast, before he detonated them, causing bits of meat to fling off. The creature screeched and turned to Fevra and began charging. Fevra ducked behind a few trees running around it and towards Vera, who had gotten to her feet. They ran along the path, then looped around to see that the beast had begun bashing its head into the tree Fevra had run around. They both charged their energy and shot out darts that pierced its flesh, exploding on impact. The beast reared up and screeched, then exploded in a dense cloud of black energy. Fevra and Vera were knocked back, slamming into the trees that surrounded them. The beast screeched, and from its mouth a large energy ball formed, swirling around like a galaxy. Fevra and Vera stood up and were taken by surprise as the energy ball blasted out towards them. They threw up shields and jumped out of the way as the mass of black energy hit the tree closest to them, exploding as it burst through the wood, causing the tree to topple over backwards. They stood up again and looked themselves over for injuries. Noticing they were fine, they backed against a tree and caught their breath. The beast screeched, but didn't do anything else as it assumed its attack had killed its prey.
I have a stupid idea,
Fevra said as he looked to Vera, who looked back to him with confusion.
What idea?
She asked, and he smiled.
When I say run, you run, got it?
He said, then stepped out from behind the tree. Vera attempted to stop him, but was too late and hit the back of her head against the tree, cursing in her mind.
Fucking idiot.
Fevra reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. He opened it and pulled out the ball he had gotten from the old man on his first job. Vera looked at him with pure shock as he waved his arms around like a fool.
Hey, want the ball? Who wants the ball? You do, don't you?
Fevra said, catching the beast's attention. He waved the ball around a few more times, asking the undead nightmare before him if it wanted to catch. He tossed the ball and it flew past the creature towards the back of the cavern, and the beast screeched, then began to charge.
Oh shit. Run away.
Fevra screamed as he turned around, then sprinted past Vera, who looked at him with pure shock and disbelief. She sprinted after him, yelling.
What the fuck was that? Are you fucking high?
I thought it would work.
Fevra yelled back as they dodged past trees.
Are you fucking kidding me?
I don't see you coming up with anything,
Fevra replied as he ducked under a low branch. The beast burst through the trees, causing loud crashing and crunching to reverberate across the cave walls. Vera stopped in her tracks, catching Fevra off guard.
Oh yeah? Well, watch this,
she said, then charged her energy, blasting it out in a solid beam. The red aura sliced through trees, causing them to crumble to the ground right on top of the beast, who screeched as 6 trees crushed its body. Fevra looked back in awe and came to a stop. Vera charged her energy again, then directed another energy beam into the beast's flesh. She struggled and fought against the pain as her soul sapped away from herself.
I could use a little help here,
she grunted through her teeth, and Fevra stepped forward, summoning a mass of fire that he flung into the beast. They continued to assault the helpless abomination with spells until its piercing screams were silenced. The amount of fire he had used began to eat away at the forest, lighting it ablaze. Vera fell to her knees, then coughed up blood, and Fevra dropped to her side, placing his hand on her back.
Are you all right?
He asked, and Vera looked up to him.
Just get me the fuck out of here,
she replied, then fell to the ground. Fevra picked her up and walked her out of the forest. They made their way back to the main entrance hall, to see Haru sitting cross-legged on the floor meditating, and Hana standing over the elven who had woken up during their fight with the abomination. Fevra walked Vera over to the wall and sat her against it.
I feel like I swallowed fire,
Vera said, then pulled her aura around herself, beginning her healing process.
I take it you killed the beast.
Haru said, not moving from his spot.
What was that monster?
Fevra asked as he looked over to him.
That was the result of combining our collective magic with the corpses of deer. As you have seen, the power of Vera is strong even after hundreds of years without the church.
Haru stated calmly, without even opening his eyes.
You could have told us exactly what we were facing down there. Fucking thing damn near blew us to pieces.
Vera said through gritted teeth as she sat up from the wall.
What would I have said?
Haru answered, and Vera coughed up more blood.
I don't know, maybe there is a massive ball of rotting meat that can cast void spells? Anything to warn us about what we were getting into.
Vera replied as she struggled to push her color into her internal injury. She could feel that the wound was a tear in her stomach that was simple enough to heal, but would hurt like crazy.
Vera, please be careful, you used way too much soul magic.
Fevra said as he dropped to his knees next to her.
I'm fine,
she replied, then pressed more energy into her wound. She gritted her teeth, then exhaled as the pain subsided.
Fuck, that hurt,
Vera said, then pulled herself up from the wall.
Now that we have taken care of your abomination, tell us how to destroy this thing.
Vera said, then pulled the blade from her hip and tossed it to the ground in front of Haru. Fevra stepped forward and looked to the clock, which still laid open as smoke began flowing out from it. He approached the clock and pulled his collar around himself. He focused on the mechanism that allowed the door to move and studied it. After a moment he walked up to the door and pressed the center of the pentagram with a click. The door shifted and began to close. He turned around and smiled.
Took care of that issue,
he said, then dropped his aura. Haru opened his eyes and reached out for the sword. Vera twitched in anticipation, but Haru simply held it in his hand. Jinra shifted on the ground to look at the group.
I guess you are going to take me alive, so I will tell you this much. My king doesn't care whether I live or die. Even if you send my head on a platter to him, he wouldn't care. Destroy the blade if you want, but your time will come,
he said, which caused everyone besides Haru to turn to him. Vera stepped to him with a disgusted look on her face.
Trust me when I say this. Your king will die by my blade. Your plans have failed and your life is in the Morden's hands. Enjoy your last days of freedom, because I doubt you will see the light of day again,
she said, looking him deep in the eyes. As she stared, his eyes went from a deep blue to a vibrant red shaped in the form of a cross.
I highly doubt that,
Jinra replied, then smiled. Vera, now even more frustrated, kicked him in the face, using her color to augment the force of impact. Jinra grunted, then fell unconscious once again. Haru looked down to the floor in sadness as Vera stepped back towards him.
All of us need to form a circle around the blade. From there we can focus our color together and dissolve the blade back into its original state. Come,
Haru said calmly. Vera looked at him with hesitant contemplation, then walked to his side and sat down with her legs crossed. Fevra and Hana followed shortly after, sitting around the blade that was being held out in the center by Haru.
Extend your color out and touch the blade. You will feel each other through this process. Don't fight each other, just let the energy flow,
Haru said, then pushed his color out. Vera, Fevra, and Hana followed his lead, and each wave of energy pressed against the metal. They felt each other's wavelengths passing through them. The offbeat patterns and opposing flow of the four's individual energy signature fought for control for just a few moments before they flattened out and sang harmoniously with a deep thrumming that reverberated across the stone. The blade lifted off of Haru's hand and levitated a foot off the ground. A muddy aura spun around it as each color clashed against each other, sparking and crackling in flashes. They focused intensely on keeping their energies matched to each other. The blade began to shake and quiver in the center of the four mages. Sliver by sliver the iron the blade was constructed from fell apart, trickling to the ground with a tiny metallic clink. As the blade fell apart into a fine dust, the energy pulsed out as if it was attempting to fight back.
Keep your mind steady. Do not let your energy waver.
Haru instructed as he adjusted his wavelength. Fevra began panting as his energy sapped away from him. He had used so much magic the past few hours that he was beginning to feel exhausted. Vera, already having her color drained far beyond her usual limitations due to her use of soul spells, began sweating while Hana sat comfortably as she hadn't used nearly as much power as the other two. They watched the sword crumble to powder, finally reaching the hilt. Vera gritted her teeth in pain as her color was nearly depleted.
"Come on, you bitch,"
she grunted, and Haru extended his color further to compensate for her waning power. As the last slivers crumbled to the floor, Vera fell backwards, falling unconscious. Eve woke from another nightmare. This time, however, the dream had been specifically regarding a large metallic being that appeared outside of the woman's door. The metallic being stepped through the door, and the woman would step aside, gesturing for it to enter.
"I take it your experiment was successful, Alyssa,"
the woman would say, then the metallic being would turn around and begin speaking in a tinged, almost monotone voice.
"My experiment? What do you mean?"
The woman would turn her head in confusion, then look over the bulky black metal being that stood before her.
"I see that your prediction was correct. A total loss of memory was an issue you had brought up to me before you worked on the girl. She, however, held all of her memory,"
the woman would say, then place her hand on the chest plate of the being.
"I will have Marin look into fixing this issue for the next transfer,"
the woman would continue as the metal being looked at her with a confused body language.
"I don't understand. What happened to me?"
the metal being asked, and the woman would look up to it with a frown.
"All will be revealed in time. Grin, please escort Alyssa out of the castle,"
the woman would say, and moments later, the door would open. Before she could see who this mysterious Grin was, her dream would flash to the next scene. Her understanding was taking shape, but for what reason she couldn't say. If it wasn't constant images of death, her dreams would repeat this scene over and over again. Each time she fell asleep, she was haunted by horrors, and no amount of prayers would stop it. She breathed heavily as she paced around her room. The unintelligible words she had heard 1,000 times, whispers under her breath. She had lost her husband, she knew it. Farron had abandoned her and used the summons to Meridia as his way out. The slowly creeping madness had finally taken hold of her mind, and she could do nothing to stop it. Night after night, she whispered the words before she fell asleep, and once more when she woke. The glow of the moon illustrating her sanity slipping away from her.
Vera, wake up.
Fevra said, kneeling over her. She opened her eyes and looked at him.
"What happened?"
she asked, and Fevra shrugged.
You passed out. Looks like you are all right now.
He replied, and Vera sat up, pushing his face away with her hand.
"How long have I been out?"
she asked, and Fevra stood up, offering his hand.
About 5-10 minutes max.
He replied, and helped her stand up. Haru sat in the same place as he had been and looked up to Vera.
Remember that Vera has something in mind for you. Despite our recent actions, she is looking out for you,
he said, and Vera looked at him in confusion.
"I don't believe in gods,"
she replied, and Haru smiled.
You should,
he said, then nodded to Hana, who expanded her color, summoning a pink blade in her hands. She swung true and beheaded the old man as he relaxed into his death.
The necromancers are destroyed. The blade shattered and the elven in custody. Our job is finished, only leaving my payment,
Hana said, then dropped her aura as she looked at Fevra and Vera.
"First thing we are doing is bringing the elf to Kaisha, then we will discuss taking you to the Evergreen,"
Vera said with malice.
I agree. We can't drag the elf around in the state we are in all the way to the Evergreen. We need to get answers from him, and the only way to do that is to ensure he is locked away. He is a highly trained mage, and keeping him tied up with old ropes will ensure that he could escape. We need to move now and move fast,
Fevra replied. Hana rolled her eyes and retorted her acceptance.
Fine, but I will get what I was promised.
Vera walked over to Jinra and attempted to pick him up, but didn't have the strength. She gestured to Hana, who walked over and helped her pull the unconscious man up. The three walked out of the castle and into the cold night. They arrived back to their camp an hour after the sun rose due to the added weight of the elven. Vera and Hana slung him over the back of a horse, then gathered a few extra ropes to tie him up with. After they were satisfied that he wouldn't fall off, the three began packing up their tent. Vera pulled a paper out of her horse's saddlebag along with ink and a quill, then quickly wrote down everything that had transpired. After the ink dried, she rolled the paper up and tucked it into one of her pockets. They packed the tent onto Fevra's horse, then mounted and began riding towards Shikari.
I will need to sleep for a month after this,
Vera said jokingly, and Fevra, who was beginning to feel sore, laughed.
I hope you sleep more soundly than before we left.
He joked back, and Vera shot him a look of absolute spite.
I would have, but your fat ass takes up most of the bed,
Vera replied.
Dear gods, do I have to hear about your disgusting romp? I already had to deal with your screaming, so spare me the pain of reliving it again,
Hana said as she sped up, moving in front of them. Vera and Fevra looked at each other with smiles. Cress walked softly across the stone as she circled Neela, their colors glowing vibrantly against their fur. Neela made the first move, swiping a poleaxe down at an awkward angle, causing Cress to jump back. She followed the attack with a spell that bounced off the ground, flowing upward towards Neela, who used the axe to deflect it back towards Cress. As it reached halfway between the two, Cress detonated the spell, then used the momentary flash it created to summon a dart above Neela. It crashed down, but was absorbed by Neela's shield.
Nice try,
Neela said, then spun in a circle, creating a ring of fire around her. She pulled the fire upward, then let it spin in a vortex. Cress took a step back and gathered her energy. At the same moment that Neela pushed the fire out, Cress shot a beam of ice directly into the fire. The heat melted the ice, which caused steam to explode in the room. Neela, caught off guard by the sudden loss of vision, put up her shield once again. Cress sprinted around the training room to Neela's back and then pulled the steam to her. It gathered around her, revealing Neela, who had stayed in place. The steam began to recrystallize into a massive ice ball that she then launched towards Neela. She spun around now, aware of what had just happened, and was struck by the ice. She tumbled to the ground as her color disappeared.
Oh shit, I didn't mean to hit you that hard,
Cress said, cringing at the sight of Neela, who was now picking herself off the ground.
Damn good idea. Quick thinking on your part, Cress,
Neela said, then brushed herself off.
You taught me well, I guess,
Cress replied, then smiled.
I do wonder if you have surpassed me in skill though. I was totally caught off guard by that attack,
Neela said as she picked up the poleaxe from the ground.
I wouldn't say that. Maybe I can outspeed you, but your mastery of color far exceeds mine,
Cress replied.
I doubt that. I'm getting older. My speed is lacking and my reaction time is faltering. You have another 10 years before you're my age, and in 10 years I will have lost my touch,
Neela said, then walked to the weapon rack and placed the axe in its place.
No one can escape the ravages of time. Don't let that get to you,
Cress replied with a reassuring tone.